Okay. Perfect storm. A virus peril in Asia's sprawling slums. So here they're talking about, we all hear about this social distancing. You have to keep away from other people in order not to spread germs. However, Asia tends to be very, very populated. And they show this little kid here in the Philippines. That picture, let's take a look at it right there. Oh, there's more than one. Let me go through them. Let's see, right there. Look how tiny that area is. People have to live in. It's really sad. And I believe this is in Tondo. By the way, Tondo gets his name from the civilization that was there when the um, Spanish went to the Philippines, Magellan. The Tondo Empire was still there. They operated out of Manila, and supposedly they operated since the first millennium. So they were there for a long time, and the Spanish arrived, I believe, 1523, something like that. So they were there for a few thousand years. Well, look at this. All right. So this Tondo residents said they had been out of work since Philippines quarantine began. Hmm. These are people who are barely existing. I saw a YouTube video. Somebody did a video a few months ago. I think it was around Christmas time, and they bought like some food and so forth, fast food, and they took to Tondo, you know, and they were giving away. I guess they just knocked on different doors and gave away food. And one person commented that if it were not for this food, I wouldn't have any food that evening. Yeah, that's how bad conditions are there in Tondo. So Mary Grace Aves is terrified of the daily coronavirus pandemic, but the best weapons to protect her family, isolation and sanitation, are unreachable luxuries in the Manila shanty town they call home. The same particularly dangerous set of threats loom over hundreds of millions packed into Asia's massive slums, where staying clean is nearly impossible and people have to leave their homes daily to survive. Quoting here, it may be possible to isolate in other areas because they're rich. They have big spaces, said Aves, a mother of four. Here we are crammed. If you run into somebody on the way out of the house, you will touch, the 23-year-old said from her closet-sized home in Manila's Tondo district. Asian nations have imposed increasingly heavy measures to fight the contagion, with the Philippines ordering around half of its 110 million people to stay home. That quarantine includes Manila, but there was no sign of authorities enforcing it in slum areas on Wednesday. The order was being flouted in many parts of the sprawling metropolis. Because the virus spreads through droplets that can be picked up with one touch or inhaled from a sick person's sneeze, global health authorities say the best protection is staying home and keeping hands clean. And of course, that's easier said than done. If you live in the Philippines and you need to make a living, how are you gonna survive staying home? That's not something you do. You know, it's not something you do. But if you cannot do either of these things, ask Annie Wilkinson, a fellow at Research Group Institute of Development Studies, in an opinion piece. There is a real risk that the impact on the urban poor will be considerably higher than elsewhere, she wrote. East Asia and the Pacific are home to 250 million slum dwellers, most of them in China, Indonesia, and the Philippines. A 2017 World Bank study said homes in these slums are tightly packed, tiny spaces that are only big enough for sleeping and lack running water, cooking, laundry, personal hygiene, and leisure are done in common spaces filled with people, which means residents have to be in public in order to survive. In Avis's settlement, there are no surgical masks, hand sanitizer, or sinks, and toilets are buckets emptied directly into the black water of the Estero de Vita River. The narrow, muddy passages between the homes are only wide enough for one person, so locals touch frequently as they slide past one another. An infection there would have everything it needs to spread. Life and death difference. More than 218,000 cases of the COVID-19 infection have been detected globally, with nearly 9,000 deaths. Asia's poorest have been largely left to protect themselves as the outbreak accelerates. Neither Indonesia nor India have imposed lockdowns. And Indonesia is like what? I think like yeah, probably after the United States, they're the most populated. They're the most populated Muslim country. So you have like China, then India, the United States, then I believe Indonesia. Indonesia has a lot of people. I believe over 200 million people. It's a lot. In Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan said the government would not impose a large-scale urban lockdown against the virus because it would extract too great an economic toll. Well, that's the only way to get rid of that virus, I guess. If we shut down the cities, people are already facing difficult circumstances. We will save them from corona at one end, but they will die from hunger at another end, Kane said. Tondo residents said they had been out of work since the Philippines quarantine kicked in, but would be forced to go out to find other employment since their money ran out. Once their money ran out in a matter of days. Unlike wealthier communities that can restrict access to outsiders with entrance gates or security guards, slum areas are wide open. There's a possibility we'll get infected because we can't control who comes here, said 48-year-old Feli Tombaga, who runs a small store in Tondo. We don't know if outsiders have the virus, she added, noting that locals were increasingly wary of anyone they didn't know. For slum dwellers who develop severe cases, reluctance to seek care due to the cost involved could prove a daily decision. The strength of a nation's healthcare system has been a key factor in death rates, but so is the severity of infection when people seek treatment. Public health expert Gideon Lasko said the ability to pay but also to reach the hospital as lockdowns tighten will be decisive. Immediate access to quality care can mean the difference between life and death, he said. Well, look at what's happening in Italy. So, I mean, the Philippines is still lucky. I think last I checked, they had like about 202 uh, case of infection. I think they had 3 deaths so far. They have a population of about 110 million people. Italy has a population of about 60 million people. In the news, it was about like maybe 435 people died in Italy same day. In one other article I did, about 90 people, yeah, 90 people died in the same hospital on the same day in Italy, northern Italy. Mhm. And yesterday they were talking about, I think, over 400 people, maybe, or maybe even over 1,000 people died in within 24 hours in Italy from the coronavirus. So the Philippines is still, uh, it's still not bad. And another thing too about germs, if you notice, like these kids who grew up in the slums or what have you, uh, their bodies become accustomed after a while, like playing in the dirt and being in dirty areas and so forth. So from a young age, their bodies begin to build up immunity. So whereas if you or me go in there, we we come down with some kind of an infection in no time. But with them, it's like nothing. So who knows? Chances are probably nothing might happen to them. Because it's like being around dirt. I mean, the article mentions the way they get rid of sewage, like after they use, they do number two or what have you. They just put it in a bucket and just throw it in the river. That's it. So it's very unsanitary. So with that, you have lots of bacteria, lots of things. So the immune system is kicked in from a young age and to protect the body. And I think here, like here in America, a lot of parents are careful about their kids and this and that and so forth. And everybody wants to run to the doctor. And kids don't really get the chance to build up that immunity like years ago growing up, when you go outside and you play, nobody was worried about what happened to their kids and so forth. And you get that chance to build up immunity. Whereas these younger kids these days, they tend to be more sickly. So who knows? Maybe in the Philippines, you know, their immunity probably would be much stronger living in conditions like that. Because I see in some videos little kids playing at the side of the street, big trucks passing by. To me, that's scary to see a big truck passing by, a little kid just sitting there playing, running, and there it's like to them it's nothing. So they have a way of dealing with stress, So it's kind of weird, but I believe there's a verse in the Bible that mentioned that says the meek shall inherit the earth, and that's what it comes down to. Whereas the people in the high and mighty neighborhoods, the ones with the gates and the security and all that, they probably die quicker because they're more protected. They're not in the environment whereby their body can build up immunity. So the people who are very little, who've been out there, who've been close to the dirt, the soil, everything like that, those are the meek. and they might be the ones who will inherit the earth, like it says. You know, so that's it. That's the way it goes.